get started. There we go. Cool. So agenda for the meeting today, we're going to focus on the same top three priorities: permissionless hubs, permissionless signups, and the features that we're actively working on. And for anyone who's interested in getting into the real nitty-gritty of how things work, we have the full roadmap here, which links to our GitHub board that you can plug into and read if you'd like, and see all the little things that we're working on. So if you have a bug or anything that you've reported and you want to check on its status, this is a good place to go. The second thing I wanted to talk about is metrics. So we've been looking at metrics every week at the protocol level for the last couple of weeks. And two metrics that we're looking at this week are signups and transacting users. Both had a pretty nice boost right after our last call, sort of related to mostly related to Twitter's rate limiting, which I think brought a bunch of users in. So we had a very large number of signups and actually a bunch of existing users that reactivated as well. And our numbers have actually been pretty strong for a couple of weeks. I expect this to revert a little bit to the mean because I don't think it's like a fundamentally sustainable growth, but I do expect we'll also keep a chunk of these users that have come on board. And so it's a nice little boost to protocol growth. Ultimately, I think the big unlock is going to come once we're permissionless and people are building applications. But it was a really nice boost and brought up quite a bit of vitality into the protocol these last couple of weeks. Two other things that I want to talk about from the ecosystem perspective. One, Naynar has actually launched hubs as a service, which is really cool. So if you want a Farcaster hub and you just want it set up immediately, you can go here, pay $29 a month, and Naynar has a hub that they will provision and give to you very quickly. So if you've been looking to get started with a hub and don't want to deal with the hassle of setting it up on your own cloud server, here's a quick and easy way to just put in your Stripe credit card and get a hub running. If you have any questions, you can reach out to the Naynar team about this directly. Third thing, we have a new homepage for Farcaster. Achal, who's on the call, actually helped designed all of this site, and we are going to ship it live later today. And I wanted to give you guys a quick sneak peek of what the site looks like. So we have a new landing page, and there's some stuff below the fold that explains what Farcaster is and makes it easier. We've kind of targeted the site towards two groups of users. One, people who are just interested in decentralization and want to start using apps. And the other is developers who want to learn how to build on Farcaster. So there's two main call to actions. One is browse apps, which takes you to an apps page. And we've tried to list all of the major apps on Farcaster here. So this makes it easy for people to find apps and utilities that they can play around with. And the second one is a developers page, which has links to the YouTube videos and some of the tutorials that we've created in a nice, easy to find place where people can discover this stuff and start building on Farcaster. So this is going to sort of sit at farcaster.xyz sometime today, and we can do that. The thing that I really want to get from folks on this call is feedback. So high-level feedback is if you have a chance to play around with the site, I'll drop the link in chat here so you have it after this call. This is just the temporary site. And give us feedback either on Farcaster or DM me directly. Anything that stood out to you that worked really well, anything that was confusing or hard to understand, anything that felt broken from a links perspective, all of that feedback is really useful. The second thing that's helpful is on the apps page, if you have an app that's not listed here, it should be listed here, let me know. It should be a quick and easy add. If you have an app here that's listed here and you want a different description, also let me know. I tried to ping everybody and get feedback, but I haven't heard back from some folks. So we did our best job at getting a tagline for everybody in here so it looked nice when we launched. And the third thing on the developers page is we've actually expanded out the tutorial site. So it has a much larger tutorials page where you can go filter by levels of difficulty. There's only 5 of them now, which is the 5 that we've built. But one of the things we want to do here is encourage people in the community to create more tutorials that are helpful. So if you've written guides that you've sent out to other people, things on how to set up hubs, how to do authentication, things that you want to see listed here, just DM me and I'm happy to add this as an item, and this can link out to whatever page or YouTube video or tutorial that you have. Conversely, if there are tutorials that you want that you don't see out here, let me know as well. We'll either do them internally or we'll find somebody who's excited about writing it and get them listed on here. Cool. That's it for the quick preview of the site. I'll let y'all play around with it. Any initial thoughts or feedback or questions on this before we move on to the more tactical stuff? Nope. Okay, great. So permissionless hubs. There's four things on the dock right now. So one is fixes for hub stability. We're rolling out a new patch version today that should fix two things. One is that some hubs were slow about accepting messages, like pushing a message to a hub sometimes spikes to as much as 30 seconds. And Aditya's got a fix out for that today. Two, some hubs are still running out of space. We have a larger iterator fix that solves a bunch of those issues, and you should see far fewer of those issues going forward. Second thing that we're doing is we're making the add a hub process easier. Right now, it's kind of painful because you have to add it to the site, you have to deploy it. It's not clear when somebody has actually done the deploy, so it's a very painful process. We're going to make this a lot easier by having a public GitHub that just has an allow list of all the sites, of all the hubs. And if you merge a new hub in, it's updated in real time. So nobody has to do a hub deploy. In real time, all the hubs will read straight from this allow list and update it. So as soon as you get merged in, you're good to go and you can spin up a hub. And hopefully this makes it a lot easier for people trying to start hubs. The main focus that Aditya is working on are 3 and 4, which is opening up signups or opening permissionless hubs, sorry, is what it should say. And the thing that's kind of blocking us right now is we want to make sure that if we open this up and somebody spins up 100 hubs, the network just doesn't go down. And I think we're mostly there, but there are a few benchmarks and performance tests that we want to run internally to make sure that those numbers that we get under those stress tests actually make sense before we open up the hubs. So Aditya is doing a bunch of benchmarking today. Once that's done and we have a good sense of where the breaking points are, where things are working well, we'll make a final call on opening up permissionless, and then you won't even need to do step number 2. You can just go straight to adding a hub. So once we've done the benchmarks, we'll have a good sense for how much work there is, if any, and we'll have an update for you guys by next week. Cool. Moving on to permissionless hubs, permissionless signups. This is the part where we want to actually migrate everything over to mainnet so the contracts are live and any application can sign up their own users. And there are 4 kind of chunky pieces of work left to get done. The first one is flexible storage, which we've talked about and we've gone over the video in previous calls, so I won't spend too much time on this. But it's the idea that people can choose how much storage they want and pay for additional storage. So you're no longer limited to just having 10,000 casts. You can buy additional units of storage and get 20, 30, or 40,000 casts. This is implemented from a technical perspective and the hubs are already listening to this contract and ingesting events, but we won't actually flip the switch that starts respecting these limits until we get to the migration, which will be sometime in later in August. The second piece is on-chain signers. So I've talked to some of you about this directly, and this is the big sort of change that I wanted to talk about today. So let's maybe start with like what signers are and what the problems are. So today, the way it works is if you want to give another app permission to post on your behalf, you give them a signer. And this is a process by which you take your custody address, you sign a message that approves another key pair that can publish messages on your behalf. And the third-party app that you're using generates this key pair. And so now they can go publish messages on your behalf. The problem we ran into with this approach was because we're doing this off-chain, there's an ordering problem that makes this really tricky, where if somebody accidentally creates, let's say, 100 signers, and hubs have a limit on how many signers they have, they'll end up bumping out the oldest signer. And this creates a bunch of cascading problems because now your earliest signer might have gotten deleted. There's a second issue with this as well, which is if you want to transfer your address, like you're moving your FID from one address to another, or you do a recovery. So we're launching a recovery system as well. So if you ever call a recovery, because the FID moves from address A to address B, and all the signers were signed by address A, they now get invalidated and dropped from the network. And so it creates this whole bunch of race conditions. It's actually a huge pain in the ass for developers to manage, and it was going to create a lot of footguns for users that was pretty painful to solve. And the approach that we've taken with on-chain signers is to move the signers on-chain. So now that we're actually thinking about moving to an L2, where the costs are a lot lower, this becomes a much more viable option where users actually issue the signer on chain and it's recorded on the blockchain. And then you have a bunch of nice properties, like you can actually stop somebody from exceeding their signer limit. You can have much higher limits because the blockchain acts as a natural rate limiting mechanism because there's a cost to adding signers. And most importantly, when you move an address from A to B, the signer points to the FID and not the address, and so it automatically keeps working. So when a recovery happens or when a transfer happens, you're guaranteed that none of your messages get lost as a user, which is also a really nice property. The downside, and I think this is obvious, is there's a cost and a transaction that needs to happen on chain. And users have to pay somewhere between 10 cents to $1 today. Ideally, this number comes down over time, but it's still a cost, and that will affect how often users add signers. So the way that Warpcast and other wallet clients can help with this approach is to make it easy for users when they sign up to kind of pay a blanket fee that gives them the on-chain transactions that registers their addresses and purchases storage, and also pay ahead of time for the cost to add a couple of signers, so that when you actually want to connect apps, you have 2 to 3 free messages where you can go and add and remove applications. And then beyond that, you can have the user pay for their own transactions. So there's a lot of ways in which I think we can reduce the friction here. But the most important reason we're making this change is because it dramatically improves the user and developer experience in a lot of these cases. Cool. I know that's a fairly meaty topic, but any initial questions from folks on this? Cameron asked in chat what the timeline for this is. So we'll kind of implement this silently on testnet. So while it's on testnet, these transactions and on-chain signers will be handled by Warpcast in the background. We expect that to happen sometime in the next 2 to 3 months. And then when we're on mainnet, which will be on 10.4, it will actually go live and it will actually have a real cost associated with it. So the first part of the change should be mostly invisible to developers. You'll kind of go through all the same processes and get the signers. You just don't have to deal with these signer add messages anymore. You can just kind of directly read the signers from the hubs. So very minor change. And then the larger change for Warpcast and other applications that are custodying will happen in the mainnet release, where they have to handle payment flows and all of this for users. Cool. Very quiet crowd today. Usually we have a lot more questions. Moving along, the next topic was L2 decision. So we finalized the L2 that we want to use on. Dan's been talking to a bunch of the teams, and we've decided on OP mainnet as the chain that we're going to be launching on when we get to mainnet. The main reason we chose this, or the main reasons we chose this, was one, simplicity, EVM compatibility, and the ability to just take our contracts and drop them over there made a lot of sense. Two, the ecosystem. I think a lot of people are building on the OP stack, and there's a lot of other projects either building chains on OP or building directly on OP mainnet that was compatible and seemed like a good home for us to be on. And finally, the OP team is just really excited about what we're building and is very aligned with us, and we've decided to build on top of it. Dan, anything you wanted to add here?
Yeah, I just say we're still trying to finalize some of the details, but I think generally we're really aligned with the long-term vision of the OP stack, and I think it gives us a lot of flexibility for Farcaster to start with OP mainnet, and then as things improve for both running your own, roll up and things like that. Like we just have a lot of optionality there. And I actually think there's really nice composability with some of the stuff that OP mainnet is doing around EAS, if you haven't looked into that. So attestations. And WorldCoin is there. And so I think actually from an identity composability standpoint, it actually works really well. And I think that plays well towards Farcaster actually being part of people's, Ethereum-based identity.
Cool. Any questions on that before we keep rolling forward with the rest of the updates? All right, mainnet release. So the final piece is going to be how we actually get all of this migrated over to mainnet, and it's actually a fairly complex process moving all of the current state over from L1 Gurley to L2 Gurley, which is going to be a test, and then finally L2 mainnet, which is where the final contracts are going to live. So we expect this to happen sometime in October or November. And by the next developer call, I should have a more timeline-based plan with all the exact steps. and how different pieces might be affected here. We expect a little bit of disruption on the day that we do the migration. There's a good chance we'll have to pause signups for a few hours just to make sure we copy state over correctly. And for developers that are reading directly from the contracts, I think there are only a few of you doing that. You're going to have to read from the new contracts. But for the most part, if you're reading just from the hubs, transition should be pretty smooth. You'll hit the APIs and get back all the same data that you asked for, and everything should work fine. There's a question on whether we're looking for support on the migration from the community or it's a core team gig. We are always very open to contributions. There are lots and lots of issues on this list here that I've linked that could use help, that we could use help with, ranging from performance to other things. So if you're interested in contributing, there's a lot that you can do to help with the migration. I'd say a good starting point is to take a look at the board, and if you see things that you're excited to work on, you can DM me on Farcaster or Telegram, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Yeah, let me drop the link here. And if you ever don't have this link, you just have to go to GitHub, the Farcaster GitHub, and you can just kind of jump into any of the projects, the Hub Mono repo, and take a look at the issues. And that has all the stuff that we're working on with milestones and status and everything. But if this is your first time contributing, I would say the easiest way to do is find something that seems exciting to work on, ping me, and we can figure out the best way to make that happen. Cool. Other feature that we want to talk about, ENS usernames. So this actually went out at the protocol level. So the Farcaster protocol supports ENS usernames. Sanjay shipped this change early last week that went out with the 7.12 protocol release. So as of now, you can publish off-chain messages that prove that you own an ENS name or that prove that you own a Farcaster name, and we will actually add that to your profile. Warpcast is still making the changes that will allow you to A, display those in the UI, and B, set them in the UI. We expect that to roll out sometime early next week. But from the protocol perspective, this is actually already rolled out, and you can query the new user data APIs, and you'll be able to see the data. If you're interested in how it works, there's a video overview here that talks through it, and the protocol spec will be updated and finalized. We're a little behind on finalizing some of these, so there's still some gotchas that some blanks that I need to fill in here and here. But for the most part, this spec describes how it works, all the new APIs and all the details, and the video is a much gentler introduction to the spec that does it at a more high level. Cool. If you are thinking of building something with ENS usernames and you have feedback either on the current implementation or if things are not clear, you don't understand how the APIs work, again, feel free to ping me or Sanjay. We're happy to help you get set up. And if there's documentation that can be added, we'll definitely take a stab at adding it. Okay, that brings us to the end of the feature list. I want to give a few shout outs. We've actually had a lot of contributions from the community. First is Dejan Park from A16Z, who did a audit, like a friendly audit of all our contracts, and actually helped us add Halmos, which is a symbolic testing framework to our contracts, which we're playing around with, which is really cool. Second, Greg for updating all the Searchcaster stuff and performance. I know a lot of people have built their apps on Searchcaster, and I saw a lot of graphs going down, which is always good for performance graphs. So thank you for doing that. Also, thanks to Hirsch, who raised some interesting approaches to using BLS signatures that we've been talking about offline. I don't think we're going to use them before mainnet, but I think there's some very interesting things we can do with different signature schemes and permissioning once we've launched on mainnet, and we've been having some good discussion on that. Finally, Stefan for implementing fallback RPC support. This is actually really cool. So now you can connect multiple RPC providers. And there's a PR that's gotten merged into the hubs that makes it easy to do that. And then Manan and everybody else who reports hub bugs, thank you for writing up the detailed bug reports. It makes it super easy for us to track them down and fix them pretty quickly. Actually, Zach should get a shout out here as well. He's been catching quite a few issues and reporting stuff that have been helpful. All right, that brings us to the end of this call. I don't have any other topics that I wanted to discuss, but let me open it up for questions for a few seconds. to see if anyone has anything, and if not, we'll call this a wrap and end the meeting early. Question from Cameron in chat. For on-chain signers, will the user flow in Warpcast change? For the most part, no. I think you'll have the same UI and ideally the same or very similar APIs that you'll call. The one change is that it may take a little bit longer to actually confirm the signer because it's an on-chain transaction. And instead of getting the signer from the hub or getting it from the API response, it's actually just a contract event. So as soon as a Warpcast tells you that the event is completed, you can then just start using the signer. So from a developer perspective, it's slightly longer wait and slightly nicer UX in that you don't have to deal with the signer message. But we'll have an actual like doc for like, hey, here's the changes you need to make, if anything. And I'm hoping we'll have no changes needed from developers, and we'll walk you through all the screenshots and the new UI. Cool. Well, great, folks. If that's it, we'll call this a wrap here today, and I will see you all here 2 weeks from now. Thanks for coming, and for those of you at ECC, enjoy.